Hey YouTubers, welcome back to Knime Tutorials. Today I'm going to be covering how to use and troubleshoot the String To Date&Time node in Knime. I'll also be discussing the use of flow variables to control the node with examples. This is the first of a series of planned videos focused on manipulating date and time data in Knime. Let's get started. Dates are very common in datasets, and before you can work with them in Knime to extract minimum and maximum values, day of the week, and calculate differences between dates and even shift them, they must be formatted in a way that Knime understands. Before we get started, I need to mention, when you load an Excel file with columns that are already formatted as a date-time data type, Knime will inherit that data type, so there really isn't much you need to do in the way of basic formatting here. There are a couple tricks I'll share later in this video about Excel files specifically. Dates can appear in many different forms, from simple month, day, year to combinations that include day of the week, time zones, dashes, forward or backslashes, and more. While some tools may successfully auto-detect the format of your date data, and Knime does this to a degree, this is not always going to be the case, and you'll need to provide the correct pattern for your date. Understanding what your date data looks like is key to successfully parse it into your workflow to use for analysis. For this example, I have created a few different basic data sets that include dates in multiple fairly common formats. The first dataset I put together mirrors a consumer complaint dataset that I downloaded from data.gov. I reformatted the dates to help illustrate how auto detection works in Knime. The other dataset includes dates that need formatting patterns entered into the node. The node we are going to explore today is the String To Date&Time node. Once you've loaded your dataset, you may or may not be familiar with the data types of the columns that are in your dataset, so it's always good to take a look. Looking at my subset of the consumer complaint dataset, it appears that there are two different date columns, the date received and the date sent to company columns. Examining the data in these columns shows that these dates are formatted the same way: 4-digit year, 2-digit month, and 2-digit day with a dash separating them. Knime can easily guess this date format. Confirming this ahead of time will make using the String To Date&Time node a bit easier. Keep in mind that when dates across different columns are formatted differently, you will need to use a separate String To Date&Time node for each date formatting difference, since the node is set up to only accept one date pattern at a time. Let's connect the node to our dataset and open the configuration window by double-clicking it, pressing F6, or by right-clicking and selecting Configure. You will most likely see all of your dataset columns on the right inclusion side of the configuration window. Since we know we just need the two columns, let's move all columns to the left exclusion side and then return the two columns we want to keep back over. I am going to enforce inclusion here to just keep these two columns. You'll need to decide if you want to append selected columns or replace selected columns. If you choose to append columns, Knime will add new columns with a suffix of your choosing into the dataset while retaining your original columns of data. I generally choose to replace selected columns since I really have no need to keep the originals. For many date-time formats, clicking on Guess Data Type generally works really well. For times when Knime cannot guess the formatting of your date, I will show some examples of how to write date format patterns. Once you select the Guess Data Type button, the date format field adjusts to the format that your data is in and shows you a preview of the actual current value of the first cell. This is not confirming that anything is working. It's just simply showing you a preview of your data to compare to the pattern. This preview is really handy to have when you're working through date formatting that Knime does not automatically detect. The date format is also a dropdown and offers a lot of different formatting options to choose from to help you get on the right track if for some reason your date format isn't automatically detected. An important note: if you were following along with the video with your own dates and you've played around with the node in your Knime installation already, the Guess Data Type button may not work the same way mine does because Knime saves the patterns that are entered into the field to use in future guessing. The Date and Format section indicates the composition of your date column when it's output. If you have a column with date time but simply want the date returned, you can select just the date from the New Type dropdown. Additionally, depending on where you are or the data you're working with, you can adjust the locale. Unless you specifically want the node to fail if a date is missing, uncheck Fail on Error. With this unchecked, Knime will generate a red question mark in cells that are missing data. You can filter on or write expressions in logic to deal with the red missing question mark later in your workflow. If you have a large data set that might be changing with each load, or you have a lot of columns that contain a similar prefix or suffix, you have the option to select columns based on a wildcard or regular expression pattern. As seen here, if I type date followed by an asterisk, it captures my two date columns since they start with the word date and are followed by some text as demarked by the asterisk, and are now moved into the green include side. I've mentioned before, and I'll say it again, Knime's integration of wildcard and regular expression options throughout nodes like this is an awesome feature and gives you more granular control of your data. Click OK and execute the node by pressing F7 or by right-clicking and selecting Execute. Depending on your data, the stoplight will turn green or will turn green with a yellow warning triangle. If you hover over the warning triangle, you'll see a message about items that could not be converted to a date time. This is normal, especially if your column is missing data. Once the node has been executed, let's take a look at the data. For our two columns, we now see that the icon next to the column name has changed from an S, which indicated that the data type was string, to a small calendar with a 31 on it. You'll also notice that the date format has remained year, month, day separated by dashes, since that's the default Knime date formatting. As a double check, let's take a look at the Columns tab and take a peek at the column type. It shows that our columns are now local dates, which is exactly what we wanted. Okay, so that was a pretty straightforward example of parsing dates in the String To Date&Time node. Let's load in some data that has date and time in the same cell, but is formatted differently across columns. As a note, the help contents for the node provide information on the placeholders available to use for building correct date patterns for your data. Some great examples are given to get you on the right track, and Knime even provides a link to the Java Platform Standard Edition 8 site that further explains patterns for formatting and parsing. The file I've read in for this example is a basic comma-delimited text file. It has one row and 3 columns with date-time data, and they are all formatted slightly differently. Some of these date-time groups are missing leading zeros on parts of the date. The first column has its date in 24-hour format, while the other 2 columns' times are in 12-hour format with AM and PM listed in the cell. Of course, each date is split up differently with dashes and slashes. Since this dataset is comprised of 3 different kinds of date formats, to successfully convert these into formats that Knime can use, 3 different String To Date&Time nodes are required. Let's tackle the date_time column first. I ensure that my column is on the include side and click Guess Data Type. The node returns a red text message indicating that no suitable guess format was found based on my data. With the help documentation and the current format as a guide, I see that month is a capital M. But since my month is missing a leading 0, I enter the capital M just once. I enter the /, and now I enter 2 lowercase d's for the 2-digit date, another /, and then 2 lowercase y's for my 2-digit year. I have to enter a space, since my 24-hour formatted time is one space away from the date. The help documentation indicates that the hours for 24-hour time are entered as capital H's. I enter the colon and then type in the lowercase m's for the minutes. Click OK and execute the node by pressing F7 or right-clicking and selecting Execute. I see a green stoplight, and looking at the output table, the column was converted successfully. On to column date_time_1. This date is formatted as a 4-digit year, 2-digit month, and 2-digit day separated by dashes. The node fails to find a suitable format through guessing, so I'll need to enter the pattern manually. There is a space, and the hour and minutes are followed by an AM. Looking at the help documentation, we see that in 12-hour time, the hour is marked by a lowercase h, and the AM/PM is marked by a lowercase a. Update the formatting to look like this. Execute the node. Double-checking the output table, we see that the formatting was accepted and we've successfully converted the column. The last column is date_time_2, and we will try to guess the data type again. No luck. This time, the month lacks a leading 0, so we just enter a single capital M followed by a backslash. We have a 2-digit day and 2-digit year, so we enter 2 lowercase d's and 2 lowercase y's respectively. Again, our time is in 12-hour AM/PM format, but has the addition of seconds. Much like before, we add the lowercase h's and m's for hours and minutes in 12-hour time. This time, though, we add 2 lowercase s's to mark the seconds, and finally the lowercase a for the PM. Click OK, execute, and take a look at the output. It looks like the column was formatted exactly as expected. As you see here, all 3 of the columns, though originating as different date formats, are now all formatted in the exact same way. This will allow you to conduct various other kinds of date manipulation later, such as date differences and date shifts, to name a couple. A special note: while it might seem that you should just need to write the pattern for what you want the output of your date field to be, you need to provide the pattern formatting for the entire date. Then adjust what you want output via the New Type dropdown. Depending on your data, there are many more ways that you can format to include days of the week, quarters, time zones, and more. Hopefully you are beginning to see how these patterns work to fully understand the formatting of your date and time data. I'm going to hop back into a node here. Remember, if you want converted fields to include the date and time, ensure that date and time is selected on the New Type dropdown. If you just want the date without time, then select Date. This selection generates what appears to be an error message in the node in red text. Don't worry, it's simply a message indicating that the date alone will not include a time or time zone in the output. Click OK and then execute by pressing F7 or right-clicking and selecting Execute. The node executes. We see a green stoplight. Taking a look at the output, time has been dropped and only the date comes through. Let's go back and add the time back in. Execute. Now look at the output. The time has been re-added. For just time and not the date, select time on the New Type dropdown and execute. Now just the time from the cell is showing. One last tip. Let's read in an Excel file that has data already formatted as dates. In this case, the date column is read in without issue and includes the dates and times. But say we don't want the times in the cells. A quick way to resolve this is to use the String To Date&Time node. Add the columns and click the Guess Data Type and Format. Because of the inherited Excel formatting, it's auto-detected without a problem. From the New Type dropdown, select Date to just retain the date. After it executes, you'll see that just the dates are coming through and the time has been removed. It's a really handy way to strip parts of date data from Excel formatted files. Now, for a little bit on troubleshooting. Again, I strongly suggest that you get familiar with the patterns for formatting and parsing dates to be most successful with getting Knime to properly detect your specific date. It can be a bit maddening at times to get this node to work if you don't understand how to build the pattern properly. If you're struggling and Knime is not parsing your date how you would hope, you'll see either a yellow warning triangle or a red circle with a white X. If you mess something up with your pattern, Knime will tell you what happened in the red circle output, or tell you to check the message in the missing cells in the yellow warning triangle output. In this example, I removed the space that's necessary between the end of the year and the hour. When I hover over the red circle, it tells me that the field could not be parsed at index 7. While to some this may sound overly technical, and maybe even a bit scary, it offers enough of a clue to help me solve my problem. The parsing is based on the programming language Java, as the node help documentation states. And simply put, an index is where the character or value is sitting. In Java, an index starts counting at 0, not 1. In this particular case, the value 5 in my date is at index 0. Doing some quick counting, I find that index 7 is where the space should be. My entered pattern does not account for this space, which is what is causing the error. Now I can go back and double check that particular part of my pattern and fix my error. Outside of the basic functionality that I just covered, as with most nodes in Knime, you have the ability to control various configuration points through the use of flow variables. Flow variables are dynamic data types that allow you to change values in expressions or node configurations on the fly. I will cover 2 helpful uses of flow variables in the String To Date&Time node. For this example, I built a component with quick form nodes that, when double-clicked on, allows a user to make some selections that then feed through the workflow as flow variables. Components allow you to containerize parts of your workflow, and quick form nodes inside of components allow you to make selections or enter data that generates flow variables. I will cover components and quick form nodes in much greater detail in a future video. After exploring the variable outputs of the various new type options in the String To Date&Time node, and using a single selection quick form node, I built a single selection tool that generates a flow variable that corresponds with the options of the new type section of the node's configuration. Using the string input quick form node, I configured a variable called suffix, whose value can be whatever the user enters into a text box field. The output of the merge variables node here shows the 2 variables that are feeding through my workflow: the date_time variable and the suffix variable. The variables merge into a single stream and connect to the top of the first String To Date&Time node. This allows the flow variables values to be available throughout the entire workflow. I'll open the configuration I just created and select local_date and then enter a dash followed by processed for my suffix. Now it's time to configure the String To Date&Time node. Clicking on the Flow Variables tab of the node displays all of the elements of the node that can be controlled via flow variables. The 2 that I care about for this example are suffix and type enum. Generally, the node Flow Variables tab will closely mirror the names in the standard configuration window and are also grouped together in a similar fashion. Since I configured my own suffix, I select suffix from the dropdown, which feeds in my variable with the current value of dash processed, and date type from the dropdown at type enum to feed in the variable with the value local_date that was selected. With the configured flow variables now overriding the default flow variables of the node, when I return to the Options tab, the node now tells me that suffix and type enum are controlled by variables. This is an extremely helpful notice, especially when you're troubleshooting large, complex workflows. To use my new suffix, I select Append Selected Columns, but leave the default value in the field since it's being overwritten via my configured flow variable. I am also going to quickly jump into my other two nodes and update the type enum flow variables. Let's execute and take a look at the output. You can see that not only did the appended column use the suffix that I created as a flow variable, but it also controlled the output of the date to output as just the local date, which is what I selected from my list of 3 options that I had hard-coded into the QuickForm node. Let's go back, and this time I'll select local time and type something different for my suffix. I'll execute all nodes in my workflow and see how the other columns were impacted. Because I'm using a flow variable to control the type enum configuration across all of my nodes, all of my date columns are output as times. You can imagine how this can save you time in large and complex workflows and allow you to quickly adjust your data on the fly. This is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to building out components that let you configure your workflows through the use of powerful flow variables. That's it for the String To Date&Time node. I hope that you found this helpful. If you've liked this video, please give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Feel free to comment below with questions and suggestions for future videos. And as always, happy Kniming.